Big Atari 2600 Plus firmware update news. Once more, the Atari 2600 Plus, of course, being this wonderful thing just here, which I reviewed over on my main channel on Control@Reese. I've done a teardown of it on this channel, on Reese Rambles, and I've done some follow-up videos talking about news and stuff, because I love this thing, and my viewers love this thing, and it's a great thing. And I wanted to do another news update now. I have some more kind of concrete news about this firmware update. And just speaking... just to take a very quick diversion, I actually did another video on this back at the beginning of December, which was when this was first being talked about on Twitter. And there were a few accounts on Twitter that I was convinced at the time were officially associated with either Atari or with PlayOn, who designed and manufactured this thing, talking about an update that was going to come out. It was planned to come out around Christmas. So I put out this video talking about big Atari 2600 Plus Christmas firmware news. And I said quite confidently in the video, I quite confidently referred to this thing as the Christmas firmware update. And yeah, first couple of weeks, like I say, this went out first week of December. First couple of weeks had loads of really great comments and loads of great feedback on this, and loads of people really excited to see this thing kind of being updated. As you can see, I've also improved my lighting since I recorded this, because this whole studio setup is new for me. But yeah, and then after the first couple of weeks, I started to get some quite abusive comments from people. People calling me a liar and saying that I was making stuff up for clout, and where's the evidence that this thing's planned to come out for Christmas and all of this kind of stuff. And like I say, it was just it was all based on the evidence that was kind of available to me at the time, and the chatter that was doing the rounds at the time. I thought it was official. Maybe it wasn't. I went back looking for those tweets. I should have showed them in the video, but I didn't. But I went back looking for those tweets, and I basically couldn't find them. So I took the video down, because I don't want... It's a whole public perception thing, and I don't want people to think that I'm spreading misinformation and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, that whole thing was based around a post on the Atari Age forums. Of course, the now official Atari forum, as actually owned by Atari nowadays. Just a question from a user on there, and then Ben from PlayOn, like I say, the company that designed and built this thing, actually chipped in and said that we're working on an update. It's not going to be too far. It's not going to be too far away, and it's going to fix all of this stuff, some kind of vague stuff, 7800 emulation stuff, and power color palette stuff, and cartridge dumper stuff. And yeah, then on the 12th, 12th of December, Gary Kitchen, who of course legendary Atari game developer from back in the day. He has a new company now with David Crane, who of course was one of the founders of Activision and creators of Pitfall. They released a game recently called Circus Convoy for the 2600, and it didn't work because they used a weird kind of ROM memory mapping technique in that cartridge. And yeah, he actually released a video on the 12th of him testing that firmware update with his game and showing that it now works. So yeah, you get more evidence that this thing has been around for a while. But anyway, apart from me feeling slightly vindicated, yeah, this is indeed a thing, and it's now ready for testing on the 29th of December, a mere 4 days after Christmas. And the list of fixes is absolutely fantastic, so it's really, really cool to see this. And they're basically doing a kind of semi-public beta test, really. Not public as in they're going to make it available for everyone to download and test, because I imagine if there are any bugs that cause any serious issues, that would be absolute pandemonium. And I can't imagine that they would have wanted to have released that in the the final days before Christmas, and have everyone break all of their consoles over Christmas and then come back to a complete and utter mess, having had some nice time off. So I'm a software developer myself. I totally understand that approach. But yeah, so loads of great fixes in this, and if you want to... if you have an account on Atari Age, which I did, but apparently it doesn't work anymore, I can't log in, and password reset's not working either, so that's a whole different issue that I'm going to have to try and get sorted. But yeah, Ben from PlayOn is posting again, as of 14 hours ago, saying that they are looking for beta testers for this new firmware update. If you have an Atari 2600 Plus and you have any of those games or peripherals that were having some compatibility issues, as some of the reviewers found. And the list of fixes is quite extensive. It's really cool to see. So they've made changes to the dumper. The dumper, if you're not familiar with the way this console works, basically you put your original cartridge in it from back in the day, or your modern homebrew cartridge or whatever, and it copies the entire contents of that cartridge into RAM, and then the emulator that runs on an ARM system on a chip inside this inside the 2600 Plus loads the game from that area in RAM and runs it. And because that's not the way the original console worked, there are some compatibility issues that they've had to iron out. And because over the years, bigger and bigger cartridges came out for the 2600, particularly like modern homebrew stuff, the developers came up with new and inventive ways to cram more and more data onto those cartridges, and it has to basically support all of those to be able to load the games properly. So hence compatibility issues with some games. But they've made a load of big improvements to that, which they are now testing. Enables Circus Convoy to boot, which is obviously is the Gary Kitchen game that I was just showing you, and some specific updates here. That evidently a couple of these say requires 1.1 emulator update, and it does get into the emulator slightly. So I guess they're updating the dumper and the emulator, which is fantastic. And on the subject of the emulator itself, so this runs Stella internally on that system on the chip, which is a really big sort of open source, long-running, well-established 2600 emulator, which works. It runs everything, so there's no reason that this can't run everything eventually. Like I say, the main issues are with the dumper itself that dumps the cartridges. But it's what is it called? Pro System, something like that. The one that runs the 7800 games. I don't know. I'll look it up. But so they've made improvements to the PAL color palette. Apparently, the color palette wasn't quite right running PAL games. That isn't something that I noticed in my particular testing. But that shows some real attention to detail, doesn't it? So that's cool. They're detecting whether a cartridge is a PAL release or an NTSC release correctly now, and running the game at the correct speed depending on its region. Again, not something I really tested extensively, and not an issue that I really discovered, I guess because I wasn't specifically looking for it, but evidently it's an issue and it's fixed. And some people found that the difficulty switches, this obviously being modelled on the 2600, has the difficulty switches on the back, and some people found that they were the wrong way around. And so loads of fixes on the 7800 side. Obviously, the dumper again, issues to do with compatibility between NTSC and PAL releases again. They've increased the maximum cartridge size and the dumper read timeout, which will allow it to support bigger games, like bigger modern homebrew games. And quite a lot of improvements on the 7800 side of things, which is kind of what I focused on in my review. So that's really cool, because I think the 7800 is a very sort of underrated and unappreciated console in Atari's history. So cool that they've focused on that, as well as fixing some of the kind of more underlying issues. Obviously, it's the much more complex console as well, being the newer console. So I guess that it's understandable that they would have more issues on that side of things. But I tested it with the 2-button controllers in my review, which a lot of people didn't do. Found that yes, the 2-button controllers from the 7800 do indeed work very well. What I didn't spot in that review, because it's been a very long time since I played on a real 7800, was that the buttons were reversed on the controller, so they fixed that. Not really a huge issue, but one thing that does fix is that if you're only playing with a single-button controller, there's actually, because it was mapped to the wrong 7800 button, there's actually a lot of single-button 7800 games that you couldn't play before on the 2600 Plus, which you can now play, because obviously usually you'd press kind of the whatever button it is on the pad, but as far as the console's concerned, it's registering the other button, which doesn't do anything, and because you've only got a 1-button controller, like the joystick that comes with the 2600 Plus, you couldn't play those games properly, and now you can. So that's really cool, and that's actually quite a big substantial fix, and one that I kind of glossed over before. Improvements to the Poke sound chip. The Poke sound chip, of course, Atari's infamous awesome sound chip that was used in a lot of their arcade games and in the 8-bit computers and stuff. And there are some 7800 games that had Poke chips inside the actual cartridge. I tested them very briefly, found that they worked, but evidently that could have been improved in some way. So they've improved it, which is great, very welcome. Different Poke configurations. The Yamaha 2151, which is another sound chip that was used in some games, that's now supported. The 7800 expansion module, I'm not quite sure who asked for compatibility with that, but apparently that works now. So that's cool. And they've got updated colour palettes for some games, and then they really kind of get into the weeds really with the technical side of things with the Maria, which is the graphics chip in the 7800. They've done a load of sort of very low level fixes for that, which is fantastic. Cycle accuracy improvements and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, this update's fantastic. It's going to fix absolutely loads of stuff, and it looks really good. And yeah, I guess the intention was for it to be out around Christmas time, and it's only 4 days later. And like I say, I guess they kind of didn't want it out there and potentially breaking people's consoles over Christmas. Hence the ever so slight delay. But anyway, apart from me feeling a bit vindicated about that announcement and turning out that I was actually right, that's not the big news here. The big news here is that yeah, it's coming. It's very soon. It's coming, and if you want to help test it, you can actually go over to Atari Age and you can sign up and state your case, and you may get selected to help out. I think it's a very manual process at the moment. Potentially, probably only open to people with testing experience and people who actually own some of those games and peripherals that were having issues on the 2600 Plus. So what I would advise, and it's not really down to me, of course, but if you're just looking to update it because you want the latest and greatest, and it's not quite right and I want it to work properly, so I'm going to update it, even though you're not having any specific issues, I would say hold off. It's still in beta status. It's probably fine, and if you're the kind of person that likes to play with that kind of stuff, then fair enough. Knock yourself out. I usually am, but I think in this case, I don't really have time to sort of help out with testing, and there's pages and pages of people who've signed up for this. So I think I'm going to let people just have at it. Keep an eye on the thread and obviously see how things go. And then as soon as this thing is ready for public release, I'll be ready to hit the ground running and do a proper sort of in-depth video covering all of the new improvements, I think, because I think there's a lot of interest in this console on my channel. But one thing that has been brought up in the kind of follow-up replies to that forum post is Flashcart, and again, PlayOn aren't saying anything either way. And again, as I've kind of speculated before, and I think it's quite a reasonable thing to speculate, Atari are selling re-releases of old games and new games and stuff like that on cartridge. And it's probably not in their best business interest to allow flashcarts. As sad as that is, I know all of this stuff's ancient now and it should support it, but technically, because of the way the cartridge dumping works and all of that, they are going to have to jump through some hoops to kind of enable that. And I can see why that's certainly not a priority. And like I say, business-wise, it's probably not in their best interest. So that's probably why it's not going to happen. But what I will say is that obviously we will have in our hands very soon a firmware update tool, which we're told runs on Windows. And we will have a firmware update file. So I think it's only a matter of time before people start to pick that apart and work out how the firmware updates actually work. And we'll start to see some sort of third-party unofficial enhancements and stuff to this. That's generally how these things go. So I'm not all that desperate for flashcart support. I quite like playing, I've got quite a few of the original cartridges and stuff, and it's quite fun to play with those with this thing. And ultimately, for me, it is a very nicely made, a very solid, very pretty shelf ornament that also happens to run games as an added bonus. So, but yeah, it's so cool to see this, actual attention to detail and getting all of these little things ironed out, which is really cool to see from new Atari, scoring yet another win, which is fantastic. So, yeah, really cool. Finally, just want to say thank you to Dave from This Week in Retro, who pointed this out to me and actually sent me the link to it this morning. Like I say, I don't think I'll be testing this, but I certainly will be keeping a very close eye on it. And as soon as it's ready to go, I think I'll be doing an update video on it. So check out the link down below for the forum thread if you want to sort of stay on top of that. And otherwise, I'll keep you updated. So. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that stuff. And go listen to Reese Rambles, the podcast, because it's great. Bye.